Welcome to CARICOMP Insider, where high-tech facial recognition meets real-world intelligence. Congress just funded a permanent biometric surveillance system inside the Department of Homeland Security. Not through a debate on the Senate floor. Through a budget line item most people never read. If you've ever crossed a U.S. border, boarded a flight, or applied for a visa, your face is likely already in a federal database. And if you haven't done any of those things, this story is still about you, because the infrastructure being built doesn't stop at airports. The fiscal year 2026 Appropriations Act, signed into law this past April, quietly cemented biometric technology as a permanent piece of DHS operations. Not just facial recognition at border crossings. Fingerprint capture, document authentication, mobile field checks, and database matching, all woven together into what amounts to a layered identity system. According to Biometric Update, this didn't happen through a standalone surveillance bill. It happened through the budget. So the question running through today's episode is simple. When surveillance expands through spending bills instead of public policy debates, what actually keeps it in check? Start with one specific provision buried in the funding law. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services now has authority to collect biometrics at remote application centers. Locations overseen not by a federal officer standing in the room, but by technology. Virtual supervision. That means a contractor, a camera, and a software system can now stand in for a human being during one of the most sensitive moments in someone's immigration process. Privacy advocates immediately flag the problems. Who handles errors when there's no person to appeal to? What happens to data quality when biometric collection moves out of controlled federal facilities and into technologically mediated settings? And who exactly are the contractors running these centers? That provision doesn't exist in isolation. It's the third domino in a sequence. DHS already finalized a rule mandating facial recognition scans for all non-U.S. citizens departing the country, not just at commercial airports, but at land ports, seaports, and what the rule calls other authorized points of departure. That language covers private aircraft and pedestrian border lanes. So the scope has already moved well past the TSA checkpoint most people picture when they hear facial recognition at the airport. For anyone who's walked across a border crossing on foot, this rule now applies to you. Zoom out further, and the architecture becomes clearer. According to reporting from Biometric Update and FedScoop, DHS isn't purchasing individual biometric tools one at a time. The agency is building an interconnected identity environment. Facial recognition feeds into fingerprint databases. Document verification systems cross-reference biometric records. Field agents carry mobile devices that can run checks on the spot. Each layer reinforces the others. For an investigator working a single case, running a facial comparison against a case file is standard, court-tested methodology. But a system where every layer talks to every other layer, where a face captured at a remote visa office connects to a departure scan at a seaport, connects to a mobile field check on a highway, that's a fundamentally different thing. And for everyday people, it means your biometric data doesn't just sit in one place for one purpose. It moves. Now, DHS officials and congressional supporters aren't wrong about the operational need. Verified biometric exit records are the only reliable way to detect visa overstays. Biographic data alone, names, passport numbers, travel itineraries can be altered or shared. A face is harder to fake. Supporters argue this infrastructure catches bad actors, not law-abiding travelers. And Congress did include oversight language in the appropriations bill, drawing lines around who controls these systems and what protections come with expansion. But budget language is a weak guardrail. An appropriations bill can fund a system in one paragraph and restrict it in the next, and the funding always outlasts the restriction. The pattern matters more than any single provision. Once a layered biometric database exists and field agents have mobile access, the distinction between case-by-case comparison and continuous surveillance becomes a policy choice, not a technical limitation. The technology doesn't care which one you pick. So, a funding law most people will never hear about just made biometric surveillance a permanent part of how the U.S. government processes, tracks, and verifies identity. It happened through the budget, not through a public debate. And the system being built connects facial recognition, fingerprints, documents, and mobile field checks into a single architecture that reaches from airports to pedestrian border lanes to remote visa offices with no federal officer in the room. Whether you run facial comparisons for a living or you just handed your passport to a camera last time you flew home, that expansion is now part of the landscape you're standing in. The written version goes deeper, links below. Now you know something most people in this industry don't. Use it. And when you're ready to put it to work, caracomp.com. We'll see you tomorrow.